I know everyone, whenever we start talking Oilers on here, it's like, oh, it's an Oilers show. I thought this was a Flames show, but I don't know how you don't talk about it. Off to their second worst start in franchise history. They went 1-8-1 in 92-93. They're out to a 2-7-1 start, same as their 93-94 season. You keep waiting for them to just kind of flip the switch, and it hasn't happened yet. Now they go to Vancouver, San Jose, and Seattle. And I think the vibe seems to be if this is not a very good road trip, changes are imminent. And what changes those are, I don't know. Again, I don't know what they are. The toughest spot there is Vancouver, but 2 wins. You talk about things I did not foresee. This is maybe at the top of the list.
It's for sure at the top of the list. This season to start has been a nightmare. There's no question. And I think really the toughest part to figure out is it's not just one facet of their game that you look at and you go, oh man, well, like they're McDavid and Draisaitl, they're not going to the point where you'd say, oh yeah, you know what? No big deal. They're just going to bludgeon their opponents for the next 2 weeks and win every game 5-4 in spite of their 32nd place goaltending. No. So the goaltending is no good. It's not all on the Stars because they've had otherworldly moments in the last number of years that everyone else has held them short. And I think it kind of evens itself out, but their defense really struggles. This team continually shoots themselves in the foot. And then they have these sort of moments in time where there is zero energy, compete, and effort. And you're going, how's that possible? So I think it's a lot of different facets when it comes to the Oilers that all adds up to being a pretty scary start. And I'll tell you this, they've got 10 games to figure it out, and that's it. No more than that. It's a purely mathematical equation and one that they won't be able to solve for if they get through these next 10 games and only have 10 points. I don't care if they're the second coming of the 84-85 Oilers, is not happening. They're not going to find a way to make it back and be a playoff team if they skate through the next 10 games without any results.
So that puts you right in that American Thanksgiving window, right? That's kind of the magic spot.
So they would just do the math. They would need 85 points or so in the last 62 games of the year. Like it's probably not happening.
What does that mean long term? Because this is the second last year of Leon's deal, and I thought, the way that these two guys stay and are career Oilers is if they hang a banner. If that doesn't happen this year, I feel like, now you're into the final year of Leon, and this thing could unravel real quick.
I disagree because, look, first off, I think those two guys are tied at the hip. Like you've seen them together in summers, and Leon bought a house in Ontario so he could be near Connor, and there's only one place on the planet that both guys can play on the same team together with their cap hits, and that's in the place they currently are in Edmonton. So I would expect some changes in these next handful of games if they don't see more results. I think the temperature gets turned up a little bit more on Jay Woodcroft game after game, fairly or unfairly. I mean, again, just go back to the math equation. In the short term, I know you asked about long term, but if they lose to the Canucks on Monday night, they're 14 points back of Van. 14 points.
Can you give Woodcroft those games though? Like if they lose to Vancouver tonight, is it tonight?
Mm-hmm. Yep, tonight.
Can Woodcroft keep his job? Because
I don't think he can. I'm not saying it's just on one game. I'm saying if you get through these next three, you don't come up with like 2 out of 3 wins against Seattle, San Jose, and Van. Like you're probably looking at a situation where you go, look, I know his track record's been good, but you got to do something to try and find a spark. And they don't even have enough cap space to like send someone down to you can't even send Jack Campbell down to the minors and say, hey, we're going to bring up Cal Pickard or whoever the goalie is there who's got way better numbers because they don't have the cap space to be able to do it.
Does it matter now? Sorry, I'm bouncing kind of all around on this Woodcroft stuff because even if they win 2 out of 3, is it more on how they play to get those 2 wins or is it the results? Because you could go and get 2 wins, but if you play the same, do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I get what you're saying, but I'm more focused on results right now.
Oof, okay. Yeah.
That's what the standings dictate. I mean, usually it's process over everything, but you could even point to the fact that the Oilers are the number 1 team in the league in expected goals for at 5-on-5. But the detractors to that will say this team has spent so much time trailing in games because they've gotten slaughtered in second and third periods that a lot of that is actually just related to score effects. There's an eye test to this component that the Oilers are failing this year that they need to figure out.
Well, and you talked about it, big changes. What can you do aside from the coach here? Like, is there anything else you can do? That roster is you're hemmed in. You're up against the cap. It's the last year of a GM who's going to the Hall of Fame season up there. Staios is gone. He was groomed to be the next guy. Like, Woodcroft feels like the only thing they can do at this point.
And who's available?
Jeff Jackson is their new CEO, and I'd imagine at some point he puts his own stamp on this, right? Like they're not going to sit idly and twiddle their thumbs. Like, patience is a Ken Holland approach, but this is the end of the road for Ken Holland. He's acknowledged that this in the final year of his deal, like he's not coming back to be a GM anymore. So he's already in the Hall of Fame. His place is well settled there. They have to me personally, I think they have to improve their defense. I think when I look at Edmonton and I look at the way their roster is constructed, I don't really think it's that far off from Toronto, except they might be in a slightly worse spot in that Darnell Nurse makes more money on the salary cap than Morgan Riley. And the kind of the way these two teams are both structured and set up, there's such an emphasis on their forwards that it leaves you wanting a lot of times on their back end that you're just not getting it.
I watched a bit of the game. I guess it was Thursday, and just watching Bouchard and his awareness, and then you've got CC. When your defensive structure, the success rate of your D hinges so much on Matthias Eckholm. I mean, he's a great defenseman. He's a fine defenseman. But as soon as his game is either he's out or his game is a little off kilter, then if everybody falls apart, I don't know. I didn't
want to make too big a deal out of it because I couldn't kind of go back and unring the bell because he stepped into their lineup last year after the trade deadline. Eckholm did, and everyone was like, look at this guy. He's the perfect missing final piece for this team. And I said, yeah, but guys, like you have 3 more years of Eckholm after the fact. And that's really the worry here is you can go out and make that trade. And if it puts you over the top to win a cup, you don't care about the next 3 years. But if he shows up in September and has a hip flexor and then all of a sudden looks old and slow in October and November, all of a sudden you're going, hold on a second here. We're paying him how much and for how long?
Yeah. Well, I just never bought that this decor goaltending group was good enough. It's you've got 2 defensemen that I think are good in their own zone, and it's Kulak and Eckholm. The rest, they have some tools, but then you go change the defensive system for said guys, and that's the one that's really crazy because coming down the stretch last year, there was not a hotter team going into the playoffs than the Oilers. It's the same group, and why are you changing your D system?
That's kind of hard to figure. 14-0-1 is how they entered the playoffs last year.
We'll wait till next week. Because Rhett kind of threw it in there, and who's available. I always wonder sometimes because you'll see teams, they'll hold off on making a coaching change, and the team will come through, and you'll look back and say that was the right thing to do. Patience was the right thing to do there. You think of John Cooper with Tampa Bay when they got bounced in round 1 by Columbus, and they were fire the coach. It happened to Claude Julien at Boston before they won their cup. He was going to be gone. They settled the waters. Those are 2 pretty good coaches in the end, and maybe in a decade from now we're talking about Woodcroft in the same breath. But I just wonder, it's easy to fire the coach. All right, who is going to come in there, not to just stand behind the bench and throw lines out. Who's going to make them better? Who's going to fix what ails them? I don't know who that guy is.
The big rumbling was, maybe they're going to go out and get Joel Quenneville, but last I checked, not reinstated. And I don't think anywhere even close to being reinstated. So unless there's some kind of magical change and Duncan Keith can work some Gary Bettman magic and make it happen, like who is the logical, this guy is going to get this team over the top and to a Stanley Cup. Like, I don't think there's some, genie in a bottle that's out there waiting for you to just tap into.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.